Good Super Bowl Sunday morning to you. It's fantastic to see everyone and to have you in our Bible class. Well, as we're starting in before all the pleasant things, let's talk about something that's not so pleasant. Anybody have a bad experience with a bully back in yesteryears? In school? At home? I hope not at home. That's terrible. So, maybe a neighbor? Yeah. I was always the smallest guy, so I don't know that I had so many bullies, but I was always afraid, that I might get a bully or maybe a little bit here and there. Bullies aren't fun, but I think no matter how small or big you are, eventually you have to face some kind of bully in life and probably multiple of them. That's true of nations, just as it is of people. And with our nation and Judah, what's the big bad bully that God's people is facing right now? Who's the nation? Syria. Ooh, nasty. And really it doesn't matter too much, who's in charge of the country. It just seems the bullying to continue, and it's just getting worse and worse. Our king is Hezekiah, and he doesn't like bullies very much, and he's someone who's going to stand up to a bully for a while, and then he gets slightly afraid, and he's not going to stand up to him anymore. Let's open up, if you haven't already, to 2 Kings chapter 18 so we can talk about our bully experience in Judah and what King Hezekiah is going to do with him. 2 Kings 18, the first verse. Now it came to pass in the 3rd year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. You probably recall that by this point in our discussion, Israel has already fallen. I've intentionally skipped ahead just a hair, and we're going to rewind just a hair now when we go back to chapters 18 and 19 this week, and then next week as we close out this section on Hezekiah. I'm going to toss this chart back up that we've considered before. I think a picture's worth 1,000 words here. It can help to put into view what exactly it is that's taking place chronologically. Verse 2, I'm going to read, and then we'll go back and discuss some of this in the chart. He, that is Hezekiah, was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. So as you're looking at this chart, I'll make mention of this, that Hezekiah, he's 25 years old, as we just read, when he comes to the throne as a co-ruler with his father. His father is Ahaz, which we've well established by this point. Sounds a lot like Ahab, and that's not good, okay? So dad was a lot like him. Well, his son's completely different. His son's a great guy. Listen, every one of us has our own decisions that we have to make in life. We may be at a disadvantage because of poor parenting, but that's no excuse for us not to be who we ought to be. We might have great parents. Now, that doesn't lock in stone. Therefore, I have to be a great kid. It doesn't necessarily mean that. I have my own choices that I have to make. That puts me at an advantage if I have great parents, but that doesn't mean that I'm going to be the kind of person that God would have me to be. I still have my own choices to make in life. He has a terrible parent. Ahaz is like Ahab, but thankfully Hezekiah makes his own choices in life. So Hezekiah is 25 when he steps to the throne as a co-ruler with dad, and that's in 728 BC. You see all the way to the left side of the screen. But daddy passes away in 715 BC, which you'll see, and that is when Hezekiah becomes a sovereign ruler, and he reigns for 29 years from that point forward until his death at 686 BC. So hopefully this chart will help to visualize that. And you'll see that during it, he experiences a sickness, which we've talked about somewhat. What we haven't discussed quite as much is this Assyrian invasion that's going to take place in 701 BC. We're getting to that, though. Verse number 3, 2 Kings 18. Good to have everybody. And he did what was right in the sight of the Lord, according to all that his father David had done. A lot of times you'll find qualifiers when people mention he walked in the ways of his father David as rulers. Nevertheless, the high places remained and so on. Well, this changes under King Hezekiah. He's a good king, and he brings about this sweeping probably more than religious reformation, remember, a little bit more of a religious restoration. It's getting back to the roots of the way things ought to be, the way things God intended. You know, when you reform, you tweak things, make it a little bit better. When you restore, you put everything back in place the way that it ought to be. Same thing as we look in our own history religiously, the difference between the Protestant Reformation and the church restoration. Okay, one is, well, let's tweak and improve some things here and there, and the other is, let's go all the way back from the beginning, rebuild it from the ground up the way that God intended for it to be. Verse 4, he removed the high places. Finally, there's no need for a qualifier. He restores worship as God intended it. He broke the sacred pillars, cut down the wooden image, and broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had made. For until those days, the children of Israel had burned incense to it and called it Nehushtan, which is translated as, what was that? The little bronze thing. To put it more in our vernacular, oh, that cute little bronze thing. That's so innocent. Nothing, you couldn't ever do anything wrong with that, the little bronze thing. They love their cute little bronze thing. It wasn't innocent to them. Well, the object itself was innocent. God had used it as a vehicle of salvation for them. But they got to viewing it in the wrong light. They began to worship the vehicle that God had used to save them instead of the God who had saved them. Roy? Yes, they did. I believe there are one or two other medical groups that use it also. Yeah, it comes from there, absolutely. Sure, which is just a further evidence of our nation's biblical background. Right. Yeah, you're exactly right, Roy. Good. Yeah, it does come from that. Okay, so verse 5. This is our memory verse. Let's go ahead and knock it out, and we can relax our minds the rest of the study. 2 Kings 18:5. Jimmy. Very good. I don't know if you feel the way I do, but it's in my version, the New King James, is a little awkwardly worded, I feel like. But very good. Good job to carry that out. So he trusted in the Lord God of Israel, so that after him was none like him among all the kings of Judah, nor who were before him. So is this saying that he's the greatest king that Israel ever had? No? Okay, that is unique. Notice the qualifier. There is a qualifier for this. Among all the kings of Judah. So it's not over all Israel, okay? But it was over the divided kingdom. He's the best king of the divided kingdom, is what's being stated here. It's not that he's superior to David as a king, but he was a very, very good king, the greatest of all of these kings of the southern portion. All right? And nor was there any like him before him, after him, or before him of the divided kingdom period. Now that's quite a compliment, isn't it? To say that you're the best of anything. I hope that after today I'll be able to say the Chiefs are the best of everything. That's something, isn't it? If you, okay, all right, I'm milking it a little bit. Oh, Chargers fans are sore losers, aren't they? That's for sure. Well, anyway, he's the best. John, he's the best right here. No doubt about that. No debating it. Of the divided kingdom period. 2 Kings 18, verse 6. For he held fast to the Lord. He did not depart from following him, but kept his commandments which the Lord had commanded Moses. The Lord was with him. There's only one other statement made like that for another king. Which king is it? The Lord is with him wherever he goes, he has success. Only stated about what other king? David. Yeah, this guy's in unique company. It's David, it's Hezekiah, and then there's everybody else. Solomon was pretty good, though, for a stretch. But these two kings really seem to stand out. So in verse 7, the Lord was with him. He prospered wherever he went, just like David. And he rebelled against the king of Assyria. and did not serve him. All right, so we all eventually have that big bully in our lives. And you get tired of getting picked on, don't you? So there comes a time that you put your foot in the ground and you stand your ground. You stand on your own 2 feet before the bully. Maybe even you get the upper end of the bully in a setting, perhaps with other people watching. So what does bully do then? One of two things. Either bully's just bigger and tougher looking than he or she really is, or bully's actually really tough and mean and sticks his or her foot in the ground, maybe both feet, and says, all right, we're going to play that game, are we? And then push has to come to shove. Hezekiah is tired of Judah cowering down before this bully. He puts both feet in the ground and he says, let's go. He rebelled. He does something that most people aren't willing in this time. Certainly his dad wasn't willing to do. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and did not serve him. And he experiences some success. We're told in verse 8 that he subdued the Philistines as far as Gaza and its territory from watchtower to fortified city. Let's look at a map right up here, and you can see somewhat central, a little bit to the left. Are you able to pick out Gaza? I know it's not extremely large print. So this is the southeastern end of the Great Sea, the Mediterranean, and this is in the territory of the Philistines. And we know their history, that not just are they tough people with chariots and, kind of similar to the Egyptians in ways. It's really strange, though. It's like just a sliver of territory onto which they hang all these years. But they remain a pretty difficult people to overcome. They keep that territory for a very long time. And you have some of the principal cities, Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod, and Gaza. So that's all the way to the west against the coast there. Hezekiah is able to do something that not a lot of Israelite and Judean kings are able. He subdues the Philistines as far as Gaza and his territory. From watchtower, that's going to be probably from a ways away that you can see, up to even the fortified cities themselves. So he places Philistia under his control. Verse 9, let's do a little math, wake ourselves up here. No better way to start a day than doing math, is there? We've got math, and then we got championship football, John, after that. How exciting is that? In the 4th year, it came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah. Okay, let's think about this for just a minute. Anybody recall what year Hezekiah assumes the throne? I say assumes the throne with dad anyway. What year does he step onto the ruling scene, Hezekiah? 728. Okay. In the 4th year of his reign, this is getting close to the first grade here. I think we're past kindergarten. What kind of math we have here? What year are we at? 724? Okay, good. 724 BC. Seems like what it would be anyway. Came to pass in the 4th year of King Hezekiah, which was the 7th year of Hoshea, the son of Elah, king of Israel, that Shalmaneser, well, they have some names over in Assyria, don't they? We've had Tiglath-Pileser, for us first grade mentality people, Put, he's also known as. That's easier to say, isn't it? How do you get from Tiglath-Pileser to Put? I like Put better. So you have Tiglath-Pileser, and now we have Shalmaneser, fantastic, king of Assyria. He came up against Samaria and besieged it. Okay, so remember, we've rewound just a little bit. Samaria is a principal city in what place? Israel? Yeah. And when I say a, really it's the. And the reason for that, it's the capital of the northern kingdom, Israel. And so Shalmaneser, the king of Assyria, he comes up against Samaria. He besieges it. At the end of 3 years, they took it. In the 6th year of Hoshea, That is the 9th year of Hoshea, king of Israel, Samaria was taken. So let's do some math. We've gone to 724 BC, and we're told from that point at the end of 3 years. So there are two ways of seeing this. What year? Israel falls. Samaria, the capital. 721, perhaps? Okay, and you'll see this slight difference in biblical history when you study it. Some will say it's in 722 BC. Others will say it's 721. I don't think it's going to make a huge difference. It mentions at the end of 3 years. It depends on how you're going to count it. So if it's 724 BC, there's a 3-year besiegement, and then the northern kingdom is taken. If you're counting all of 724, that's 1. 723, 2. 722 will get you to the 3rd, or at the end of it. See, I was going to be really close to 722 or 721 BC. But that's when the takeover occurs, and as we look back at our map, we can see that, 722-ish anyway, BC, you have the fall of Samaria. And this is during the co-regency of Hezekiah with his father Ahaz. But remember, this isn't for their kingdom. This is what's going on in the north. They're south. They're a little more protected for the time being. Look down in verse 11. Then the king of Assyria carried Israel away captive to Assyria. This is a pretty good distance that they're going to be traveling. We don't have a scale for this map right here. But as the bird flies, you're looking at 500 miles that the Israelites would be carried away into captivity. Realistically, as they're going to travel, probably 550, maybe as many as 600 miles away. So for us, if we were conquered by a people and carried away as Israel was, it's not like you're going to be taken from Conway, Missouri, over to Marshfield, or even down to Springfield, or even up to St. Louis. It's not like you're going to the Ozarks in Arkansas. You're getting close to the beach, all right? You're going way far up as well to the north. So about 600 miles, these people are carried away into a completely foreign land for them. And then we're given some more information here. He put them in Halah by the Habor. In Halah by the Habor. Okay, I know we don't have those right up here. So as we're looking at our map, you go up. We don't have Habor there, but we do have Halah. You see that north central? North central on the map. I like that one, Halah. The river of Gozan, which appears to be a stream that comes out of the town of Gozan, is going to flow south, maybe a little bit east, until it empties into the great river, the Euphrates, and in the cities of the Medes. Here's why: because they did not obey the voice of the Lord their God, but transgressed his covenant and all that Moses, the servant of the Lord, had commanded, and they would neither hear nor do them. So let's make sure we understand this. God doesn't severely punish his people because they made some mistakes along the way. He knows that we're all human. He gets that. Why did he punish them? Not simply because they had sinned, but because what? They didn't want to change. They would not listen. All right, and that's the key, which really is going to coordinate extraordinarily well with the sermon this morning. It's so important when we're in the wrong that we have an open heart and an open ear to change. Now, we don't just change left and right for change's sake, but we're open to change at any point that we need to change, not because we think or someone else thinks we need to change, but because God tells us we need to change. God tells them for centuries, you need to change. It's imperative. He's so patient with them. But they refuse to listen and make the alterations, and that's why they're completely destroyed as a country. Yes, yes. But time after time, Roy, how patient is he? But eventually, his patience wears out, doesn't it? So, There you go. And is that not 2 Peter 3, Roy, about us? The Lord is not slow to carry out his promises involving punishment, as some would count slowness. It's not because he's slow, it's because he's long-suffering or patient, not willing that any, not a single one, he hates that one person will ever be punished, much less an entire people, eventually the whole world. He doesn't want that to happen. And so, as men would count it, he's slow to carry out his promise for punishment. But in reality, it's not because he's slow. It's because he's loving. And he wants one more day, one more year, one more opportunity. Okay, we'll go ahead and take another opportunity. But we're told this: beloved, do not overlook this one thing. One day with the Lord is 1,000 years. 1,000 years is one day. He's not slow. He's patient. But we're told his patience will eventually wear out. And when that happens, the day of the Lord will come, as a thief in the night, in which the heavens will pass away with a great noise, and the elements will melt with fervent heat. Therefore, understanding all these things, what manner of persons ought you to be in your conduct, looking forward to the coming of the day of God, preparing yourself to be found by him in purity when he does arrive. Thank you for patiently waiting.
Well, what you just explained in the last part, you just constantly given us the chance to make the right choice.
Yeah, good, John. And then we find 750 years later, when everybody's given up on these people of Samaria, John chapter 4, it stated that Jesus had to pass through Samaria. Now, we're not told why, but the scripture says that he had to pass through Samaria. And I believe it is implied why in the story that follows, because there is a woman who wants to know about him. And then there's a people through that woman who want to know about him. And so, almost a millennium later, when everybody's given up on the Samaritans, nobody cares about them, there's someone named Jesus who has to go to them because he still hasn't given up on them. Yeah, incredible. Thanks, John. Transition. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you may be right. Yeah, and there's several instances, not just a ton of them, but there's several instances when the Jews are having nothing to do with than just the Gentiles in general, that Jesus begins to have dabblings with Gentiles. He's starting to show them. Good, Tony. I think you're exactly right there. All right, so back in our text, chapter 18, verse 13 of 2 Kings, of course. In the 14th year of King Hezekiah. Now, here's where things can get just a little bit confusing. At times, we're counting things from the co-regency, like we were from the beginning as we look back at our chart, counting things from the co-regency for that first 15 years. It appears here that we're fast-forwarding to the sovereign reign of the king from which we're counting. We know historically and biblically. And if that were the case, and it's in the 14th year, and his sovereign rule begins in year 715, we would be at what year? 701. There we go. 701 BC, which biblically and historically we know to be completely accurate. And this is entirely accurate also to state it's in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, just not in the co-regency, but in the sovereign rule of the king. That Sennacherib, king of Assyria. I told you there's some good names. Tiglath-Pileser. We had Shalmaneser. And now we have Sennacherib. Or as I like to remember him by, snack on ribs. It's a whole lot easier. Okay, it works, I'm telling you. I've never forgotten it since preaching school, 20 years. It works. So in the 14th year of King Hezekiah, from 715 minus 14, 701 BC, Sennacherib, king of Assyria, came up against all the fortified cities of Judah and took them. Not every city of Judah, but all the fortified cities of Judah. Then Hezekiah, king of Judah, sent to the king of Assyria at Lachish, saying, I have done wrong. Okay, let's pause right there. Has Hezekiah done anything wrong? Standing up to a godless tyrant bully and protecting his people, has he done anything wrong? Not yet. I think he's just done something wrong right there, and admitting guilt maybe when he's not guilty. There's certainly a debate to be made anyway. Whatever, he says, turn away from. He's resorted to beggary now. You know, you might get that way before the big bully. I was watching a show last night involving a bully. And one says, what do you want? You know, you can't ever satisfy him. What do you want from me? He says, I want you to get on your knees and beg me. And he won't do it. I mean, that's something you would never want to do, isn't it? It's so beneath a human being to get on your knees and beg of somebody else. But he's to that point. He doesn't mention he's on his knees, but he may be before the other king. He certainly is begging him, turn away from me. He says, whatever you impose on me, I will pay. We know that. This is, I'm afraid, beyond the lunch money scene, though, or the snack money. He says, I'll give you anything and everything monetarily. Just tell me how much. So the king of Assyria assessed Hezekiah, king of Judah, 300 talents of silver and 30 talents of gold. In the CEV and the Message translations, the reading here is 11 tons of silver and 1 ton of gold. Now, we know how much a ton is. We take 11 times 2, which gets us to 22, with 3 zeros. 22,000 pounds of silver. And then 1 ton of gold, 1 times 2 is 2, with 3 zeros. Roughly 2,000 pounds of gold. That's insane. How much money are we looking at here, Roy? Wow. It's, in our poundage system, it's 75 pounds, so I wouldn't doubt that'd be the case. 20 years of labor for 1 talent. And then we're talking about, is that gold? Okay. So, and then we're talking about 2,000 20-year spans of work to get there. Silvers, it appears probably in this time not to be worth as much. And we know that from the time of David, of course, and then Solomon. But it's still a highly valued precious metal, probably far beyond what silver is to us today. And then 22,000 of those. I mean, it's insane, the amount of money. Thank you, Roy. 15. So Hezekiah gave him all the silver that was found. Notice what's listed first. In the house of the Lord, and in the treasuries of the king's house. At that time, Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord, and from the pillars which Hezekiah, king of Judah, had overlaid, and gave it to the king of Assyria. Now, I want to do this just right here, not too much of this. Turn back to, or over to, I should say, 2 Chronicles 29. This is the sister text of this. 2 Chronicles 29. I think there's something that's kind of important in actuality, but even in symbolism concerning the doors and the pillars. 2 Chronicles 29, verse 3. In the first year of Hezekiah's reign, in the first month, he opened the doors of the house of the Lord and repaired them. So his whole mission, day one of his agenda, he's carrying through on what's in his heart, perhaps promises also that he's made to the people. He opens the doors of the house of the Lord and he repairs them. Now, as we're in 2 Kings 18, we find in verse 16, at that time Hezekiah stripped the gold from the doors of the temple of the Lord and from the pillars that he, Hezekiah, had overlaid, and he gave it to the king of Assyria. We're roughly now how many years into his reign? If you go back to the co-regency, it would be even more, but from 715, we're about 14 years into his reign. Now think about this. If your whole mission, your agenda begins with this right here, those doors and fixing those, and then 14 years later, you undo everything that you did on day one, what has he accomplished by this point? Now there's still some good things about the idolatry, and no doubt about that. But you see the symbolism, though, that's involved here? What's happened? This guy began so great, and he's having all this success, and now it seems like everything is falling apart. maybe there's been some sin leading up to this that we don't have a lot of writing on, or perhaps it's not sin, but maybe it's a test that God has allowed to come his way to see. When push comes to shove, and this big bully intimidates you, will you stand up against him? Well, initially, oh yeah, I'll put my foot down. But when he gets to a point, he's like, well, I don't know how we're going to beat this guy now. He says, oh, I'm so sorry. And he gets on his knees and starts begging, take away everything I have, take away everything that the Lord has. What does he not do when the bully comes to him? There you go. He doesn't trust in the Lord like he did earlier, it sounds like. He doesn't ask. As far as we know, he doesn't ask for the Lord's help. Roy? It appears that way, doesn't it? Yeah, good, Roy. It does seem like that. I'm going to read to you from James Smith's commentary. He says, according to the Assyrian records, Hezekiah was also compelled to make certain territorial concessions. So it seems that it's not just these many, of course, millions, probably billions of worth of dollars that have been given away, but also he has to give up pieces of his territory as a part of this arrangement. This is according to the Assyrian records. He also had to surrender an Assyrian vassal king who was being detained in Jerusalem. So one of the prisoners of the essentially Assyrians he has to hand over. And he had to send 2 or more of his daughters to Nineveh, which is the capital city of the Assyrian Empire, to become part of Sennacherib's harem. Now, can you imagine not only giving away this ridiculous amount of money, but also giving up a huge chunk of your territory permanently, and then thirdly, and worst of all, giving up some of your own kids so essentially they could become prostitutes to the king? And all of this, Hezekiah is willing to do. But there's never any mention of his dependence on God and asking the Lord God of Israel for help, as he did earlier in his reign. So a couple of things. One, does this sound familiar at all? That things aren't looking very good for him, and so he just begs the Assyrian king. Have we seen this anywhere? You remember Daddy? Ahaz? It's exactly what he did. Remember we were talking about being put at a disadvantage, but we have our own choices to make. But what we see and hear as kids, it gets ingrained in our minds. And maybe he always has that in the back of his mind that, hey, if things go south here, maybe I can always do like Dad did, and I can just beg for the Assyrian king to spare us, and we can just become subjects of his. So that's what takes place. You might recall this also. 2 Kings chapter 20. Let's read just briefly in that before we move on. 2 Kings chapter 20, involving, looking ahead, Hezekiah's illness. And we're told that he makes a not-so-good choice concerning the Babylonians. 2 Kings 20, verse 16. So the prophet Isaiah says to Hezekiah, hear the word of the Lord. Behold, the days are coming when all that is in your house, and that which your fathers have stored up till this day shall be carried to Babylon. Nothing shall be left, says the Lord. And some of your sons, just like he's already lost some of his daughters, some of your sons who shall be born to you shall be taken away, and they shall be eunuchs in the palace of the king of Babylon. Listen to the response. Then said Hezekiah to Isaiah, the word of the Lord that you have spoken is good. Which could be taken 2 ways. One, hey, even though it's against me, God has spoken it, and God's righteous and just. I don't think that's what he means by that. That would be nice. He says, for he thought, why not? If there will be peace and security in my days. He's become very selfish in his later years. And he thinks that, hey, if my transgressions are only punished in my kids and my grandkids, that's great news for me. Because my life's still going to be good. He's not thinking about anybody here but himself. So back in 2 Kings 18, when we read about this and from the Assyrian records, if these are accurate, and I assume them to be, that 2 or more of his daughters get sent off to become a part of the harem in Sennacherib's palace. And he doesn't seem to be bothered by that or greatly. I think this is the early roots of his selfishness. Not thinking about anybody but himself. So he's able to survive this by putting his trust in the king of Assyria. Technically, he's still surviving, though things are rough. Verse 17 of 2 Kings 18. Then the king of Assyria sent the Tartan, the Rabsaris, and the Rabshakeh. And in the New King James, there's italicized definite articles, so it's actually more sent Tartan, Rabsaris, and Rabshakeh. And if you look each one of these up, I don't know if there's a big difference in each one, but it appears to be some sort of title. And as far as the Tartan, that appears to speak of a field commander. Okay, very good. Okay, yeah, some sort of high-ranking officer. And then with each one of these, there's the Rabshakeh appears to be probably the chief commander. One possibility is the chief cupbearer. And then the Rabsaris, that might be more just a diplomat or a speaking person. Could be, yeah. There are different ideas as to what these are. But the point is, these are high-ranking people, of course, in the Assyrian government in general, and more specifically, probably military. So he sends these three from Lachish with a great army against Jerusalem to King Hezekiah. And they went up and came to Jerusalem. When they had come up, they went and stood by the aqueduct from the upper pool, which was on the highway to the fuller's field. And when they had called to the king, Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, Shebna, the scribe, and Joah, the son of Asaph, the recorder, came out to them. Then Rabshakeh said to them, "Say now to Hezekiah, thus says the great king, the king of Assyria, what confidence is this in which you trust? You speak of having plans and power for war, but they are mere words. And in whom do you trust that you rebel against me? Now look, you are trusting in this staff of this broken reed Egypt, on which if a man leans, it will splinter, break, go into his hand and pierce it. So is Pharaoh, king of Egypt, to all who trust in him. But if you say to me, we trust in the Lord our God, is it not he whose high places and whose altars Hezekiah has taken away, and said to Judah and to Jerusalem, you shall worship before this altar in Jerusalem? So he's viewing the purging of the high places. Even though there are sacrifices being made to the Lord, they're being taken away as a negative thing, which we understand by the law of God was not a negative thing at all. He just wanted unified, central worship taking place in one location, in one way, to him in Jerusalem. But he's appealing to the people here. Oh, you remember the way great religious practices of before. Hezekiah stripped you of your religion, is what he's trying to tell them. Verse 23, now therefore I urge you, give a pledge to my master, the king of Assyria, and I will give you 2,000 horses, if you're able on your part to put riders on them. That's a slight to the Israelite military. So small, you probably don't even have 2,000 soldiers. Even if I gave you 2,000 horses, you couldn't even put riders on each of them. Now then you will repel one captain of the least. Now then will you, he asked, repel one captain of the least of my master's servants and put your trust in Egypt for chariots and horsemen? Is that your saving alliance? Have I not come up without the Lord against this place to destroy it? Have I now come up without the Lord to destroy it? He says, the Lord said to me, go up against this land and destroy it. Is that true? I don't think so. Now there are prophecies, and perhaps he's heard about the people of Yahweh that God did say, come destroy it to the Assyrians, but that's the northern kingdom, not the southern kingdom, so I don't think that's entirely accurate. Then Eliakim, the son of Hilkiah, Shebna, and Joah said to Rabshakeh, please speak to your servants in Aramaic, for we understand it, and do not speak to us in Hebrew in the hearing of the people who are on the wall. So what he's asking for here is don't talk in the language of the soldiers where they can hear what you're saying. Just talk in the diplomatic tongue, and you and I can have this discourse. But Rabshakeh said to them, has my master sent me to your master and to you who speak these words, and not to the men who sit on the wall, who will eat and drink their own waste with you? This is kind of gross, but he's saying they're going to consume their own excrement and drink their own urine, is what he's saying about them. Right, besiegement, right, have to do with that, sure. Then the Rabshakeh stood and called out with a loud voice in Hebrew. Oh, he wants the soldiers to hear also. Intimidation, the bully. And spoke, saying, Hear the word of the great king, the king of Assyria. Thus says the king, Do not let Hezekiah deceive you, for he shall not be able to deliver you from his hand. Nor let Hezekiah make you trust in the Lord, saying, The Lord will surely deliver us. This city shall not be given into the hand of the king of Assyria. Of all the things that this man speaks that could potentially be the truth, I believe this is his cardinal sin right here. He begins insulting the God of Israel and stating what God cannot do to save his people. Verse 31, Do not listen to Hezekiah, for thus says the king of Assyria, Make peace with me, buy a present, and come out to me. And every one of you eat from his own vine, and every one from his own fig tree, and every one of you drink the waters of his own cistern. Do you think that's true? This is a good, trustworthy guy, right? This is the kind of fellow you like to be making deals with? Huh? Yeah, right. 32, Until I come and take you away to a land like your own land. Okay, now this is probably a little more accurate here. What I'm really going to do is take you out of your homeland. And they probably realize we have to mix some truth in with this before they will listen and really believe us. But it won't be a bad place. It'll be a land like your own land. A land of grain and new wine, a land of bread and vineyards, olive groves, honey, that you may live and not die. Do not listen to Hezekiah, lest he persuade you, saying, Yahweh will deliver us. Has any of the gods of the nations at all delivered its land from the hand of the king of Assyria? And whenever he says, the great king, the king of Assyria, I think what he means by that is something along the lines of the almighty king, or the king of kings and the king of Assyria. That's the mistake that this man and his people make. No God has been able to stop the God of Assyria, as in the king, its leader, the king of kings. So why do you think your God would be any different? Today, where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim and Hinah and Ivah? And you look on our map, and these are the ones in the land of Syria, not Assyria, but Syria to the northeast of the territory of Israel. Where are those gods today? Have they delivered Israel from my hand? Who among all the gods of the lands have delivered their countries from my hand, that the Lord should deliver Jerusalem from my hand? But the people were wise. They held their peace and answered him not a word, for the king's commandment was, Do not answer him. Then Eliakim the son of Hilkiah, who was over the household, Shebna the scribe, and Joah the son of Asaph the recorder, came to Hezekiah with their clothes torn, and told him the words of Rabshakeh, the commander of the Assyrian army, the mighty world empire at this time. So what's going to happen at this point? Jerusalem is besieged. Their military is nothing compared to what we're going to find of at least many hundreds of thousands of soldiers that have come and camped against this place. What hope do the people of God have? The biggest of all bullies is standing around them right now, and it seems they have no way out. What is it that they say about the really big bullies, the ones that stand really high? The higher they stand, or the bigger they are, the bigger they fall. Could it be with this one, the biggest bully of all? We'll find out next week in 2 Kings 19. Please read the 37 verses of that chapter also. Let's commit to memory the same of the verse as the chapter. Chapter 19, verse 13. 2 Kings 19:19 is memory work. Okay. 2 Kings 19:19. Yes, sir. Okay. Any other comments on chapter 18 today? Okay, thanks.